DBS community, welcome back to another video with Kyle Chris. Today we're going to be going over the state of the meta for Red going into national season. So as always, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Thank you guys for supporting the channel as we get closer to 1,800 subs. We're getting very, very close. I assume by the end of December we'll probably be there. So that's pretty cool. Going right into Fusion World stuff, which I will be going over the Fusion World reveals. Currently, I'm just waiting for all of the starter deck stuff to be revealed, which I'm pretty sure we're almost there. If not already there by the time this video comes out. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. We'll start covering a lot of Fusion World stuff, both with the physical card game and the digital card game. So with Red, Red is back. Red has been, we saw a little bit pre-ban list with Red, primarily this deck Pan being the predominant Red deck that we've seen just doing well, whether it's I don't think it's won an event this previous, like the previous meta. I think it's just done very well. But now with the current ban list with Gohan, I would sense to be sort of irrelevant now. And a lot of other bans, we're going to see Red really start to take off and really, potentially going to be the fan favorite going into nationals. I would say it's definitely probably the strongest color on paper, and just how quickly most of these red decks are going to be able to kill. Definitely 5 out of 5. I definitely think this is definitely the best color in the game currently. And a big tool is that this deck did gain a lot of defensive cards that kind of really, over the past few sets and with this previous set, it just makes the color really difficult to kill, which was sort of the, I would say the bane of red decks, is that you were able to, if you couldn't kill, it was pretty easy to kill red decks on the clapback. Now it's a little bit more difficult, but that's just going to be kind of the nature of the game, so we just have to be prepared for that. I know there's a lot of people thinking that Red is going to be sort of phased out at Nats, where there's going to be a lot of other decks that pop up that people are going to be playing. I don't know. I think it's, at the end of the day, it's a lot of just pilot dependent. That's the biggest part about this game. That's sort of the asterisk, so to speak, is that pilot dependency is a huge thing in this card game, because there's a lot of people who will play Pan who will 0-3 drop at Nats. There's going to be people who play Pan who are probably going to be in Top Cut. A lot of it's just the pilot itself. The deck itself normally is not just, insert pilot and you're able to win. So with all that being said, we're going to go over the first deck, which is the one that I showed off here, which is going to be Red Pan. This is definitely the Red Boogeyman or Girl, depending on what you want to, if you want to be funny. This deck is insane. Explosive early turns, synergy with almost every red staple in the game, because you're just able to give a card 5k, and if it's over 20k you get the draw off of it, and then those cards also draw cards. It's pretty nuts what this deck can actually do. You can have 4 or 5 battle cards on turn, turn 2, turn 3, and a lot of decks just can't deal with that overwhelming board presence. I will say some of the weaknesses to this deck. So like turn 4 is kind of when the deck wants to pop off. This is when you're going to be playing Defender of Life into your Fedito Seeker Rare. And between those two cards, most decks can't deal with both of those cards in the same turn, unless you're black. And outside of that, it's pretty, turn 4, that's kind of the pan kill turn, right? After turn 4, though, you're going to see, dramatically, a big drop off in how the deck actually is going to perform. The deck's able to sort of pivot. Obviously this can be player preference. You're kind of able to pivot into like that turn 4, turn 5 kill turn instead of just being turn 4. But again, a lot of that's just going to depend on the pilot. A lot of people I feel like are just going to just zero in tunnel vision on turn 4, playing Vegito going into the Defender of Life trying to kill. But if you go through a Defender of Life and your Seeker Rare and you're not able to kill your opponent, your deck loses a lot of ground, and you're going to start it doesn't matter how much value you think your deck has. You're just going to start getting punished by a lot of mid-range control decks going into like the long, the later stages of the game. And you actually can punish this deck really, really easily early on by kind of delaying their awakening condition, which is hilarious that you actually can do this. There's different ways. I'm not going to go over a lot of them in this video because we're mainly focused on red itself, not pan necessarily. But there's ways to kind of force your opponent to basically have to combo most of their hand to even get awoken. And at that point, if they do that, they basically lost the game because now they have 1 or 2 cards in hand. And they're not really able to do much with that. So that we might go over a video of how to counter Pan before Nats. I'll kind of think about it because I know some of my teammates are going to be playing Pan, so I don't want to kind of cripple them by giving out some of this information. I'll just use it against them when we practice so that way they know, but we'll see. The next deck is going to be one of the newer decks, which is going to be Gohan and Trunks. I think this deck has just been kind of dubbed Gohanks because of the Z leader, which I think is just better because we don't have a Gohanks leader. There's a little bit of talk about this deck being the new Gogeta GT, and what I mean by that is the amount of value that this deck can put out. This is a mid-range to late game red deck, which is not something that we see a lot. Obviously, like with Gogeta was a mid-range to late game deck. You had very good mid-game. You could aggro your opponent down if you wanted to, but middle to late game is when Gogeta really strived. And this deck kind of fits that same mold. Great cycling ability with the leader as well as the field spell that destroyed West City. You're able to just sort of cycle through cards just a lot, and a lot of those cards from underneath the West City you're able to use for combo power and other things. So you do have a lot of value on what you're able to do. I will say this deck, because of the leader effect having to activate the Gohan effects or Trunks' actually main or battle, a lot of sequencing. You want to make sure you're getting the most value out of your cards, make sure that's not going to get removed. So there's a lot of things you have to kind of know how to do. So I think this deck is going to be more pilot dependent than some of the other red decks. From the sole case of like, this is one of the only red decks that has the ability to go into late game and not feel like it's just completely just unplayable. And what I mean by unplayable, I don't mean like you can't win those games, but you know what I mean? Like, this deck actually has bigger boss monsters that you're going to play, as well as a lot of value cards for 1 energy or 0. So you're going to be able to do a lot of that stuff, but this deck can play much better in the late game than something like Pan. And that's kind of the thing with other red decks. That's definitely slower than a lot of these other red decks. The next red deck is going to be Android 17 and 18, the other red deck that's new to the set from set 23. Finally, we have a very strong non-red Saiyan. Like, this is very cool. This deck has the ability of going tall and wide at the same time, which is very interesting. Decent hand size, doesn't draw as much as Gohanks, probably doesn't draw as much as Pan. It's kind of probably a little bit weaker than Pan in that category. But being able to spam out these, 17 and 18 cards, I know probably the best way of doing it is there's a 17 that has like double strike. It's double strike or crit. It's one of those. And then the other one being a 30k vanilla Android 18 you're able to play. Between those 2 cards, your dual attacker, and then your 8-drop boss monster that has double strike that also can detach and turn into 2 more cards. It's got a lot of damage you can do. I would say the weakness to this deck is it is very energy dependent on offense. So you have to play out a lot of stuff. Your defense is pretty weak, and none of your cards really have any defense. I know you gain barrier the turn you play it, but after that turn, it's gone. You don't have barrier on that card anymore. So a lot of your cards can just get removed, and once you kind of remove a board of 17 and 18, if you're able to, that's the other key thing here, is if you're able to remove their board, they're going to struggle to rebuild the board because now they have to waste more energy in order to do that. And I would say this deck is very predictable. By turn 3, turn 4, if you've played against the deck a few times, you should know what their play line is going to be. And most of the 17 and 18 decks, I think that's where it's going to fall short, is that it is very predictable with that. Doesn't have as much utility and like pivoting potential as something like Gohanks or even Pan. In the early game, the mid game, and then late game, it's got a decent boss monster. But again, I definitely think Gohanks is probably going to be the better pick for most people playing red. If they're wanting to play a red deck that's not Pan, I think Gohanks is probably going to be the better one here. Now we're getting into some of the rogue quote-unquote picks, but these are some decks that I do think can do very well, and we might end up seeing them in Top Cut. So one is going to be the U7 Son Gohan. This is the combo Gohan. Essentially, you're able to combo U7 cards to draw extra cards, and your whole deck is basically set up to be in the combo step. So, very powerful card. This deck draws a ton, which could be good and bad depending on what matchup you have. You have a lot of unique interactions with U7 cards. So there is, because this leader is a Warriors of Universe 7, all of your Universe 7 cards that have that tag have no specific cost, meaning they are colorless in a sense. You can use red energy to pay for blue, green, or yellow U7 cards. So there's a promo that's coming out, which we'll talk about in the state of the meta for yellow, for Frieza. That's probably going to get a Rad because as of right now, you can play it for free in this deck because it reduces for every card in your Z energy, I think. And then this reduces its specific cost, so then it would be free. You can literally play it for 15k for free, and then you can actually kill 2 things and attack with it twice. So, very powerful card. I believe it's probably going to be a Rad because this is basically like the Toa situation from like 2 Nats ago. So very similar with that. But then also like you can play like Son Gohan Secret Rare because your leader is the Son Gohan Adolescence. You can play a lot of very unique Warriors of Universe 7 cards in your Z deck and your main deck or side deck, and they can be different colors, off colors, so that you have a lot of flexibility in what you can actually do. The deck though wins and loses off of its unison, unfortunately. Playing against this deck, if the unison is gone, the deck struggles to actually continue to pressure at the level that it wants to. The unisons, which in this case is going to be the Gogeta unison, the Gogeta unison allows you to play stuff for free, which then goes up your chain. You have a Frieza chain that you can play for free, but also just having the value of the Spirit Boost effects is huge, and you need to make sure that you're able to continue to do that. Now you can play the deck without the unison, but it's going to be significantly weaker. So if your unison is removed, now you have to pay 2 energy for another unison. That's not something you want to do in a red deck. You want to make sure you keep your unison on board. And if you don't have any skillless cards, that's also a problem. So playing against decks that can affect your combo area, affect your drop area, this is going to be a problem for this deck. So like black is generally not a good matchup for this deck because you can just warp a lot of their skillless cards. And the lower the skillless count is, now if you've charged any, or if you've bottom decked any, or if whatever, now you don't have those abilities to use those for combos and for other different effects. So big thing with this deck, it's definitely an early, I would say more mid-game focused deck. You can definitely kill people very, very early on with this deck, but I think it's more mid-rangey than anything. But a very strong pick. I think we're going to see it played. I don't think it's going to be a high-rated, like a lot of like the first choice on a lot of people's lists for playing a red deck. I think again, Goinks and Pain are probably the 2 bigger ones. This will see a lower representation, but I think you could see this card in some top cut situations, depending on the matchups. Next red deck is going to be Jiren. This is probably my sleeper red deck out of all of them. I think this has the potential to be a bracket breaking deck. This deck has good matchups into almost everything. A lot of the decks that were good against this, so like Gohan like whooped this deck, but Gohan was a more difficult matchup for this deck. With Gohan being much weaker, this deck is going to go up a tier list essentially, or a tier. You know what I'm saying. So the deck can go wide very, very quickly. You have the ability of just drawing tons of cards with the new anniversary support, with the Dispo and the Pan, as well as the it's a Jiren Z Battle card, which allows you to go up your chain again. You have so much value in this deck. Again, this is kind of falls into the same line as the Gohan, is that you can play this deck without the unison, but without the unison compared to with the unison, it's a huge difference. This deck gains so much more value with the unison on board. The unison also procs your Pan because it's able to gain power. It gains a ton of markers, which you can use for the -7 to burn your opponent a life. There's a lot. It's a lot. It's a very, very good deck. Also with the Spirit Boost effect, you can also, when your opponent attacks, you can evolve on your opponent's turn, which is good because then you're able to gain those markers back and do a bunch of other stuff. So with the unison, deck is very, very favored. I would say probably the best mid-range red deck. I think I put a little bit over a tier over the Gohan deck. Without the unison, it's a crapshoot. Depending on what your opponent does. If your opponent pressures you down too much, it's going to be hard. But once you play the unison out, if your opponent wastes a black smoke on it, that's not actually good value for the opposing player. So sometimes you just kind of have to just let it sit there, and that's also not very good. So you have to kind of figure out what works the best. So going into the late game, the deck is definitely going to struggle. It's definitely kind of like a turn 4, like a turn 4 deck, where you're wanting to use Secret Rare, use 8-drop, swing 3 times, do a bunch of other stuff. But after that point, if your 8-drop gets removed, as you start losing bodies on board, bodies from the drop, you're going to slowly start losing value because your leader, if this leader actually had a Z leader, I would have a whole different scenario about this, because then you would have access to a few other cards that you would necessarily not have access to without the Z leader. So then your late game would actually be better, but right now, definitely mid-range deck. I would be prepared for this deck if you're going to Nats. For EU or NA. I think this is a deck, you'll probably see it a lot in EU. I think you're going to see hopefully a decent amount of it in NA. But this deck is going to be scary if you don't know what to do, because if you tap out on the wrong turn, you're just going to die. It's got way too many swings for you to be able to survive. So just be on the lookout for Jiren players. And the last red deck is going to be Golden Cooler. This one is going to be kind of a surprise for people, I feel like. It's the only red-blue deck really we're going to be talking about on this list. This is a mill deck. So being able to utilize some of the most powerful blue-red cards in the game, and then also just being able to mill your opponent out. A lot of decks draw. It's just fair point, right? Tons of decks in this game are drawing. You're playing out tons of battle cards. You're going wide. And being able to play Coolers and Majin Buu Hercules and other cards that neg battle cards, you're just going to be losing value on board, as well as losing cards from your deck, which is, part of your game. So if you can't draw cards, or if you're drawing too many cards, that's like a secondary win condition you can't really deal with. So understanding how to play against Golden Cooler, Cooler is going to be a huge thing. Unisons are way, way, way more important in this matchup than they are other matchups. You have to just make sure you're not spamming out the board wide. A lot of different things you have to do. Some problems with this deck, though, is it is very combo heavy. So you, without super combos, being able to restand energy on your opponent's turn, you're kind of limited to what you can do. You're basically playing out cards on your opponent's turn, attacking with them, then keeping energy up for then the next defensive turn so you can play out more stuff. So you're very combo heavy. And the front side, you do have to swing at the leader to draw, so that is also a problem. So if your opponent has battle cards on board, you can't just swing into those to extend the game. You have to swing into your opponent, so you're kind of helping them get to their waking condition. And this deck gets punished by Koitsukai a lot. So this card is probably this deck is probably the sole reason why people are every deck should be running Koitsukai in their side deck. As soon as you play against Golden Cooler, Cooler, I just like using Golden Cooler because the Z leader is way better looking than the actual leader. But anytime you play against this deck, you are going to just instantly decide in Koitsukai if you don't already have him in your main deck. So I would say this is more of a late game deck. It's a mill strategy, so there's going to be certain matchups that this deck is just going to throttle. A lot of late game decks like Gogeta, this deck is just going to put hands and feet on. So you have to be ready for it. I don't know if you necessarily need to side anti-mill cards, but Koitsukai is definitely something you're going to want to run because most of this deck gets hit by Koitsukai. Now, we're going to break down some of the cards that I think you guys should be looking at with playing red going into Nationals. So first card is going to be Explosive Dance. This is really the only card from the new set that I think is just generically good in every deck. This is probably going to be a card that's going to make or break red decks going into Nationals. So if you are playing a red deck and you cannot get your hands on Explosive Dance, your deck is instantly going to be weaker than the deck that has access to Explosive Dance. So it's been errated, so that way when your opponent attacks with the card, a non-leader card, they have to pitch card from their Z energy that matches the power of the card that's attacking. So if you have a 30k body that's attacking, you have to discard cards from your Z energy that equal more or equal to or greater than 30k, so that way that card can attack. So this card is going to punish a lot of decks. Downside is you have to have a Z energy in play. You have to be at 4 life or less. So there's some setup there where if your opponent's at 4 life or 3 life and they keep an energy open for Explosive Dance, they tap one for their Z extra, you probably know they're going to go into Explosive Dance. It's very telegraphed. What's also weird is that a lot of the red decks actually are punished for leaving an energy open for this and paying energy for the Z extra. Unless it's late game, which again, the only real good late game red deck on this list that I said is going to be Gohanks, and then potentially like U7 Gohan. So keeping an energy open for Explosive Dance and playing the Z extra card, unless you play it really, really early, you're not pressuring your opponent. So decks like Jiren, decks like Pan, you're not really wanting to play this card. So it's kind of strange how you have to do it. I'm sure there's certain matchups you're going to prep for it, but the whole point of playing most of these red decks is to kill your opponent before they can get their stuff online. And if you're playing more defensively, you're not actually doing that strategy. So just an interesting talking point for this card. I think this card is still going to be, you're going to see a ton of it. This is going to be kind of what the Unease Awakening was for a lot of the Gohan, for basically every Gohan deck since Gohan came out. Like, this is kind of the next step of that. So since we are entering a red meta, this card is fantastic for red decks. It's just bad for everybody else. And then the promo that came out, the winter promo, is the Android 13 Full of Confidence. So there's only one red deck, or two red decks in this list that I showed off. Three red decks, technically, that can play this card. So I said Cooler, Jiren, and Android 17 and 18. Your leader needs to be a non-red Saiyan deck. And your opponent has to have 2 more energy. You draw a card, play the card from your hand. When it's played, you neg one of your opponent's battle cards unisons by 15k for the turn. And when this card attacks, battle cards with this card active mode at the end of the turn. So it's a 20k that also has blocker. This card's very good. I think 17 and 18 decks should play this card if you have access to it. Is it better than like Pan for the 1-drop? I don't know. Is it better than like playing Gohan? So like, this is a very strange tech slot. You just have to find out if this card's going to be worth it or not. And 15k, minusing 15k to most battle cards, unless you're in a red mirror, is not a very big thing. Most battle cards are now going to be 20ks as sort of a standard for 1 energy. So minusing something by 15k is not the best. Being able to minus a unison, I think, is a little bit better. So just an interesting tech card. That's probably the only real red card that came out of the promos. The other one's a Gohan that only works in the Gohan stack, so no reason to even bring that one up. Now, some cards that are actually going to be just generically good that you should be playing or looking into having in your main or your side. One is going to be Hidden Ambitions. It hits all the counters, the extra cards that are played for free if they are 1 cost. So any deck that plays these, whether it's Power Burst, After Image, D-Magic, Time Magic, Uneasing Awakening, like, you can just stop those cards for 1 energy and then kind of continue to push damage. Very good card. I definitely think we're going to see this card played in a lot of red decks in the side, especially against those control matchups. Another one's going to be Cell Max. This card is good in almost every red deck. I would say preferably on this particular list, you're going to see it a lot in Cooler. But a 1-drop 25k body that can also pop something that's 30k once it dies is fantastic. It's a blocker that can pop something. So not only can you block an attack and then kill something else, also restands. So it can double block and kill something. So it can stop 3 attacks for 1 energy. It's pretty good. That's a pretty good card. So definitely another good card to pick up if you are going to be playing red. And then the last one is going to be Flight of the Grand Eagle. I think this card is going to be very used in like the U7 matchups. Kind of hoping to stop the Victory Strike damage from going through. Or being able to stop like the burn damage from one of the UI cards. Being able to give any of your cards 100k for the battle is pretty powerful. You just neg 2 of your cards by 10k and you can use it for free. The card's never really seen high competitive play, but I think this Nats will be the time to use this card. There's a lot of big bodies, and also with the Victory Strike now running around, potentially being the secret that the deck plays, this is just a good tech to stop that from occurring. And to kind of close, 2 more cards that I think most people are already playing in their decks, but just kind of want to have a conversation about these 2. First one's going to be 10 times Kamehameha Mighty Blast. This is the extra card that most red decks are going to be playing outside of Sun Gohan, because they have the confrontation, the Universe 7 confrontation one. But this being a 15k combo for 1 energy, or for a 2nd energy, you can draw a card, neg something by 20k, and then also give something 15k. So it's a 40k combo. This is a very, very difficult card to play through. So if you are playing against a deck and they have an energy up, you need to make sure you're trying to bait out that energy, so that way they only get the 15k. Because having to combo over a 40k, being able to having to know you need to combo at least 40k to get over this particular card with a battle card, pretty difficult to do. So also this, again, most of the Z extra cards just sort of make a lot of the yellow negates useless. So as a red deck, you need to make sure you're playing this card. And if you do play this card, you do have the ability of setting up your explosive dance, of course. Then we have Pan, Grandfather's Strength. This card is insane. This is probably the best, the 2nd best card printed in the anniversary box. I would say the Megigabora 8-drop is probably a better card. But actually, no, you know what? No, this card is better because it's generically good in every red deck. So I take that back. Mechi's probably the 2nd best. This is by far the best card. If you or your opponent have a battle card at the 15k or more, you play it for 1. It draws you a card whenever you the power of a card is increased, and you get to neg something by 20k. So you've already seen it obviously used in Pan a ton. You see it used in the Jiren deck. You're going to see it used in a lot of different decks. And being able to just increase the power of a card and then neg something by 20k, and it's not on just your turn, is very good. So like using like something like After Image, right? You can After Image and give your leader or a battle card, you know, the 40k, and then this card will draw you a card and then neg something by 20k. You can also select Sensu Bean. There's a lot of different things you can do. So this card is insane. Bandai tried really hard to make red viable for this Nationals. They did a good job. They did a very, very good job. So in closing, red is incredibly strong. There's some red decks that didn't even talk about. One of those decks being Vegito, that I think is also a potential candidate. Probably not as good as these decks here, but there's a lot of red to worry about. So I know people there, again, some people who are saying that red's not going to do anything at Nationals. I don't really understand that, but I definitely think we're going to see red in a lot of top cuts. We'll break that down more when we get closer to Nats, where me and Kenny will do a Nats complete breakdown video. I feel like that's going to be kind of fun. So, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think of the red discussion. Leave me some comments down below if you guys think red's going to be doing very well. Don't think red's very strong. Some other red decks you might be playing for Nats. Yeah, I don't want you to give me the spice, but obviously let's just have a discussion about red in general. So thank you guys for watching. As always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.